Hello and welcome to Salesforce Architecture Talk with Gourav and Satya. This is the place for all architects, consultants, and developers in the Salesforce ecosystem.
All right, welcome everybody. Episode 8, platform development. So exciting. This is a very, very special episode. This episode, we have not tried the format yet. We have two incredible guests with us today, who we'll introduce in a minute. If you go to the next slide, Gaurav. All right, if you are joining in for the first time, my name is Satya. I'm an architect leader at Google. I'm a CTA. I run this podcast along with my good friend Gaurav here. Our aim to run this podcast is to actually make CTA accessible to everyone and encourage more people to go through this incredible exam and get this credential. So our mission really is to help people prepare for this particular examination. And today's topic is platform development.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Satya, for the quick intro. My name is Gourav, and I'm also a Salesforce CTA, architect leader here in Sydney, Australia, in Salesforce ecosystem. And as Satya mentioned, this is episode 8. This episode we are focused on platform development, and again, the pattern of executing this particular episode is going to look a little bit different because we have our two good friends with us who are going to help us to navigate through this particular journey of platform development. So I'll let Tuan and Vineet introduce themselves.
All right, thank you. Hello once again. First and foremost, Happy New Year, everyone. I know we are already in the month of February, but the last time we met was when Vineet and I had a Christmas special with Gaurav, and we spoke about our CTA journey in the first episode. And I hope most of you have watched it already, and I hope we have managed to inspire a lot of you to achieve your New Year's resolutions, aka your CTA dream. So once again, Gaurav and Satya, thanks for inviting us and giving us this opportunity. Quick introduction about myself. I'm Tuan. I'm also a Salesforce certified technical architect, now based in Dubai, and a senior manager at Publicis Sapient. Thank you. Vineet?
All right. Hello, everyone, and hello to everyone who I'm again meeting, who have been again joining in this session, and for the people who are joining here for the first time. So my name is Vineet, and I'm also a certified technical architect, currently working as a senior manager in Publicis Sapient, and I'm also based out of Dubai.
And before we actually begin this episode, just a call out. I mean, the logistics of getting the 4 CTAs in a meeting together. You talk about time zones and the challenges. I'm here in Mountain View. Gaurav is in Sydney, and Tuan and Vineet in Dubai. Oh man, that was a challenge in itself. But we are glad.
It was a project in itself. We had
Yeah.
to navigate assign and figure out who's coming in what time, and then yes, here we are. That's why it took us a long time to really plan and meet. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited. I'm super pumped about this because the way we are going to run this episode is different, is exciting. There may or may not be a little bit of competition going on. We sensed it. But you'll know soon.
We'll figure out. I think we will get to know.
All right,
awesome.
Let's get it going.
Cool, let's get into it. So I think before, again, we get into the whole platform development, many of you who have already seen this particular slide, it'll be much familiar. But again, going through the CTA journey is really climbing up the mountain or a pyramid like this, which involves a lot of different domains. As you can see, there are 8 domains where we technically we break it down, the whole journey. Of course, to get to CTA, not only the technical knowledge, but there are a lot of other aspects which are required. But these are the 8 domains which every candidate technically needs to get on: application architecture, security, platform development, and here we are. So we are talking about the domain 3. So we covered application architecture and security in past, and then now we're gonna deep dive into platform development. Again, this episode is not going to be like full blown taking you through the whole development possibilities on the platform, but we will actually cover a lot of different details. As in, we will be introducing the platform development options on the platform. Not really going to teach you how to write Apex code or how to write an LWC component, but still will give you an overview of how the development on the platform can be done. There are different capabilities available on the platform which we will touch. And now, as most of you would know, or maybe if you don't know, Salesforce allows you to go from no code approach to completely pro code approach, and hence we will look at all the different spectrum of the options and the capabilities available from no code to low code. And then there is a you can see that we will have a use case. We will pick up a scenario where we will all do our role play. We'll go through that particular scenario together, and then Vineet and Tuan will take roles to talk about low code and no code. So we'll get into the roles soon. But again, this time we are taking an example, and we'll give you a different perspective on how you would want to look at that particular part of the scenario from no code to low code. And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. Yep. Perfect. Let's get into the architecture side, core capabilities. Yeah.
The most favorite slide of every Salesforce architect, right? We have covered this slide multiple times in our podcast, but it's always important to revisit this because it is so important, right? We all know as Salesforce architect, it is the platform is what makes this a unique offering, right? So it's a trusted multi-tenant platform. We all know what multi-tenancy is. It means that Salesforce actually hosts multiple customers in their data centers and their pods. So that there is sharing of resources like storage and compute, networks, so on and so forth on a single pod, right? And on top of that, what we have is a scalable metadata-driven architecture. Now, the metadata-driven architecture is what makes this platform so magical. Any config, any code that you write on the platform gets stored as metadata on the platform. And that's what allows Salesforce to do so many releases per year. I think the releases were 3 per year, but with recently, what I've seen is that they're doing every week, right? And that's only possible because it all gets stored as metadata. On top of it is a physical database where all your data is stored, which is not exposed to us as customers or to you as customers. But what we get access to is a logical database that sits on top of on this infrastructure, right? This logical database is what are the objects that we see, the standard objects, the custom objects that we see onto the platform. Right, we don't get access to the physical database at all. It is all via the objects on the platform. Very, very important feature of the platform is the security layer. That includes identity, which is also baked into the system. Privacy is baked into the system, and there are a lot of other security measures like platform encryption and event monitoring that is part of the platform itself. And on top of that is what we see the features, the application development features, the platform features, really, right? And that box here is what we are going to deep dive today as well. It's like almost think of it as like a toolbox where you can build any applications, and from that toolbox you need to decide based on a lot of factors on which features to use to solve a particular requirement. Right, so the platform is as Salesforce markets itself as a low-code platform. There are a lot of low-code features that you can use to build automation and your processes. But you can also go on the other end of the spectrum, which is if your team is completely technical and full of developers, you can actually build very, very customized solutions onto the platform as well. And at the top, you see all these apps. So you can think of Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Experience Cloud as apps that sit on the platform itself, right? And Data Cloud now as well. And you can build your own custom apps as well, right? And there is a app store, an app exchange is what we call it, where a lot of partners have built apps onto the platform as well. And there are other products which are part of the Salesforce ecosystem now. That has happened over M&A over the years, like Slack, Tableau, Commerce Cloud, Marketing Cloud, which are very tightly integrated onto the platform. So, a very high level platform architecture, Salesforce.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Now let's talk about the no code to pro code capabilities, which probably, yeah, Tuan, if you want to take over?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, like the toolbox that Satya was talking about, so this is the platform itself in Salesforce, and let's talk about and why we think it's very important, or why this domain is important to our CPA journey. So, the Salesforce platform is the core, like Satya said. It's a foundation to the entire application, and it allows you to build amazing customer experiences and the apps. And the platform consists of these building blocks, and it gives the building blocks capability, gives the flexibility and the agility which any of the customer enterprises requires. So when it comes to the platform, like Satya said, there's a spectrum of tools. So it's a tool set. So let me briefly explain each of these in very high level. So when it comes to Salesforce, the recommendation is to go do clicks over code. So that means no code to low code approach if possible as much. So when it comes to no code, so it allows to create applications and automated processes without writing any code. So which gives it that simplicity we call the point and click, or the declaration configuration in Salesforce. So just to name a few, if you want to create a logical data model with creating objects, relationships, and fields, you can do that with point and click. Similarly, if you want to create a layout, or we call it as a page layout, or a app page, you can create that with clicks over code. Similarly, if you go into the middle spectrum, the low code gives us the middle ground between the no code and the pro code. And some of the examples are mostly in the automation side. Some example being in this diagram, a flow. So if you want some automation to be done, you can still use the low code option with configuration or with point and click to generate some automation, which simulates one of the business requirements of your customer. And finally, in the pro code, the extreme end, it involves the traditional programming, where if you have a bunch of developers in your organization, the developers can start writing code. It offers that freedom and the flexibility in the platform, where some of the capabilities which low code and no code allows, the people with technologies such as Apex or Lightning Web Components, or even in the extreme of going outside the platform, such as Heroku, to host one of your extreme applications to avoid any governor limits and so on and so forth. Your developers can do the traditional programming and expose customized applications for your customer.
Yeah, that's a great summary, Tuan. I think one other consideration is when you are as an architect, when thinking of building a solution, there are multiple ways to build an application in today's technology ecosystem. You can build, as Tuan was saying, on a Heroku, a completely Ruby on Rails app, for example, or on AWS, right? Or you can use a platform like Salesforce to build an app that you can either expose it to internal users or to your external users, right? The real value of Salesforce is the time to market. Some of the pro code features that you get with the Salesforce, like you can create an object model with a click of a button, you can create automation by configuring a flow, you get a page layout and a page configured for you out of the box. These are very powerful tools. So if time to market is your number one priority, if you want to launch a solution in a few weeks, you almost go Salesforce, and because you also have App Exchange, which is the app store for Salesforce, it allows you to build solutions very, very quickly and go to market very quickly. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's move to the next part, which is really the use case we have in hand, and then we will play different roles, all four of us. So the use case is very much focused on our real life. Hence, what we have done here is we have divided into different roles, where Satya will play a more functional role, CEO who is an executive focused completely on functionality and possibly around the budget. On different angles, Satya will have a perspective, and I will take a CTO role to look at the solution from technicalities perspective, how well it can meet, and then Vineet is going to take a low-code architect approach, where Vineet will help and come up with the simplistic, fast time to market based solution. And then Tuan will focus on a pro code approach where the complexity might be bigger and solution in low code might not be a fit for purpose, hence a pro code solution might be required. So we will take all different roles, we'll get through the scenario, and then I hope there is no fight between low code and pro code. So we'll find it out in next few minutes how that moves.
Yeah, and the intention of doing this really is to give you a broader set of perspective of, as a Salesforce architect, you may have to put in a hat, each of these hats, right? So when you're interacting with a CEO or a CXO person, you need to understand what their motivations are. When you propose a solution or when you interact with them, you need to understand, okay, what do they want to get out of it, right? And again, as we said, it's a spectrum. And the choice is always not right or wrong. The choice that you make, a design choice or architecture choice you make, depends on the situation, on the customer, how much budget they have, what timeline they're talking about, what their maturity of their development team is, how willingly they are bought into Salesforce as a platform as well, right? Because Salesforce may be just one of the platforms in their whole ecosystem. They may have people who are AWS experts, for example, right? Why would they want to build a Salesforce practice? So you need to almost think of it from a customer lens when you are actually proposing a solution to a customer.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get into the war. Let the games begin.
Go for it, Satya.
Okay, all right. So, all right. I'm the CEO, so I should know what the requirement is. So we are a non-profit company. We have donors, we have volunteers, we organize events. We need a way to capture the donor information, volunteer information, how much a person has actually done donation. So we want a system where we can track all that. We want the donors to self-register, so we do a lot of marketing through our different marketing channels, and donors come to us through our landing page. So we want a way to capture the information and have them a non-authenticated experience, but also have the ability for them to successfully log in. And when they log in, we want to make sure that when we capture the information, we are very concerned about their privacy and make sure that one of the reasons why we decided to use Salesforce was because of the privacy and security. We have a backend ERP system where we track, record everything, we invoice everything through our ERP system. We need a few ways in this new system we're talking about for us to say, when they log in, they can see the history of all the donations they have made, what was the total contribution that they have done for this year, and also create like donor certificates, right? We have affiliations with other charity organizations. You can select a charity and donate for them. So we will have the ability to generate a donation certificate. Again, want to emphasize that this solution has to be secure. Data privacy for our donors and volunteers is our topmost priority. And we want to launch this solution in a very cost-effective manner and as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's the brief of the summary, and I think functionality-wise, that's how it will look like. So Tuan and Vineet will give this scenario in your hand, and let's take it through.
Yeah. I think let's Tuan, let's go into the war room. Let's go through the scenario and then let's see what we need to build for Satya and Gaurav. Yeah, cool. All right. So Tuan, do you want to just do a brief on this?
Yep, Tuan is on mute.
Sorry for that. Yeah, like Satya was explaining us, we have been received this brief a week ago, so we have gone through your requirements, Satya, and we have categorized them into 4 buckets, as you see in this slide. One aspect is we have highlighted in blue, which is more around your logical data model that we think we need to capture in terms of your information that you require in the CRM system. Secondly, we have categorized them as some process automation. As you said, there are certain things that you need to automate into other enterprise systems, such as your legacy ERP or the SAP system, and so on and so forth. So we have categorized them into process automation requirements. And thirdly, we have looked at some of the integrations. Like I said, of course, there are automation side of aspects, but also there are certain interfaces that may need to talk to in terms of your existing systems, where we have categorized them as integration. And lastly, which is very important for you and maybe for Gaurav as well, in terms of data security, data privacy, and the role-based access model that we need to set up for making sure your donors and the donor details are made secure in the system. So we have categorized them as other in terms of security, in terms of generating your tax documents or the donation certificates, which you need to share with your other affiliations and so on, into the fourth bucket. So if you can start with the data model, Vineet, you want to start with explaining how you think about this?
Yeah. So sure. I mean, data model, in my opinion, I feel it's like the core of the architecture that you kind of set up on top of Salesforce, right? So it's very critical to understand like what are the objects that are available out of the box that you can use, because each standard object in Salesforce comes with its own life cycle and some very inbuilt features which you can definitely just configure and use it out of the box as it with a small configuration, I would say, not customization, and then that can improve your go-to market of what you're looking for. But the downside of it is like if you end up if your data model is not set up, there may be a chance that in future you may be looking at some kind of a tech debt that get incur because of this, or you may have to redo some of the processes, or you may end up doing a bit more of customization on top of it. Now, when I go through a kind of a data modeling exercise, so there are certain design decisions that runs through my head. There are certain thoughts that run through my head. So, of course, one of them being like, which of the objects I'm going to use? Like, is there something available out of the box? Some standard objects are there. What kind of relationships do I need to consider around that? Is it a kind of a master detail relationship? Is it a kind of a lookup relationship? Do we need a kind of a many-to-many relationship where we may have to introduce a kind of a junction object? Then consideration around the volume, how much volume of data will be stored onto it, and then of course in future we may have to think of some kind of archival strategy or what the performance of the queries will be if the volume is high on that specific record. But those all things we'll park for later. But when we think about data model, these are the checklist or check boxes I tend to check. And then third being around the sharing, how the data or the records of these table need to be shared. Who is going to be the owner of those records? Because again, in Salesforce, you have like the person who is the owner tends to become the god of that record. He can edit, read, and also kind of delete that record. And then you have some inbuilt sharing mechanisms like a role hierarchy, which kind of roles the record visibility. Again, these are all out of the box functioning of Salesforce. And lastly, like again, in terms of the data modeling, like of course, Salesforce provides the RDBMS concept. You can do normalization, but one very beautiful thing about Salesforce is not many platform provide that is when you set up a data model, it automatically comes with certain UI elements of it. So like that's pretty powerful. Like you don't have to think of customizing a view. The moment you configure, there is a standard page view where you can do. And the moment you start doing kind of normalizing or introducing child objects related to it, or child objects related to it, or kind of a junction object, you need to think of the user experience side of things. Is the related list enough? You need to put filters on those related lists. How many clicks do you need to go to that specific child record or to that junction record, or how many clicks you need to do to create that junction record between the two objects, right? So it's also somewhat critical sometimes to think that normalization may not be the answer every time. Maybe you may think of creating a field if the data is if the data volume is not that much. So that's where a volume comes in, and of course limits of each of the objects that it comes off with. Now, if I talk about this specific scenario here, like for example here, uh, Satya and Gaurav they are asking about how do we manage the donors and volunteer information, the donor profile, volunteer profile, event details, donor relationship, and donations. So very first thing that comes to my mind is when donor and volunteer information. So it sounds like some kind of entity or a person here. So how do we model it? Like, can it be a person account? Can it be a kind of account contact relationship? Then what are the trade-offs of the person account, right? So it's a standard. What are the how much volume does it occupies? What are the limitation in terms of report and of course on the community side of things. And when it comes to, let's say, donations, like can we use something like an opportunity? When it comes to event, can we use a campaign for these kind of things, right? So all of those is what I'd go through. And again, as and when I'm evaluating each of these objects, I again go through my checklist, like, okay, what are the different relationships that I need to form? Who is going to be the ownership and the security model around it? And of course, what's the volume around it? Right. So, Tuan, anything that you would want to add? Maybe I missed something there.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, I want to set the context and reiterate the context of my role. So I've been given a Procode role. So here, my idea is to provide my perspective and to put a point of view around how a Procode mindset works. So like Vineet was talking about some of the aspects of standard versus custom. How I think about this scenario, Satya and Gaurav, is if I take a data model, so talking about the data model itself, right? It's the foundation of your solution. If you create a bad data model, it will result in multiple issues. Things like either it could be a technical debt, like Vineet was talking about, or it could be missing out of the box features, or it have a negative impact on other technical areas such as your integrations, your security, your user experience, and so on. And it might also increase your licensing cost. Satya, you were very adamant that you are a non-profit organization. We need to conscious of the the cost aspect. So if you create a bad data model, there might be an impact on that and the project cost. And perhaps if you do a pretty bad job, it might be unhappy customer or unhappy stakeholder. So therefore, before you consider any custom objects, or if you go on the spectrum of customization, I will always ensure there is a standard object or there is an out of the box that fits your use case. But at the same time, I do not shy away from also choosing custom objects. At the end, it's a platform. Platform gives you that opportunity. If there's a custom need, why not customize? So just to come to this example, Satya, you want to capture your donors. So Vineet correctly mentioned there could be a option of either leveraging standard objects such as a person account or an account and contact. But I would also ask myself a couple of other questions when it comes to my role, customization, right? Very well, it can be a custom object. I can very well create a custom object to capture the donor's demographics. But one of the important questions that is in my head is, will there be an experience portal for the donors? Like you correctly said, there's an experience portal which require them to register and track all their donations. So as we know, some of the consideration with customer community is that for customer community access to provide, it has to be either a person account or a contact. So the donor record should be either one of those so that the record can be enabled as a customer user. Therefore, in this particular scenario, I would avoid going into the customization route because of these factors. Similarly, Vineet was talking about events. So events could be, again, a lot of options with the standard platform. Again, some of the questions I would ask is, are these events just to track attendance? If that's so, it could be a simple activity event, a standard activity event. Or is this to calculate your marketing campaigns, campaign events, just to calculate your event ROI How is the return of investments on these events? In that case, like Vineet said, it could be a standard campaign. Or if you want to track and celebrate the donors' milestones, such as life events, or to do a marketing outreach, for example, such as what's the date of birth of this donor, what is the wedding anniversary, when at what point, what was the graduation ceremony was. So if you want to capture such as those type of events, such as additional normalized donor milestones, maybe perhaps we can go for a custom normalized object where you can predominantly use that for your marketing outreach. And finally, one of your key requirements is to manage donors and recurring donations. Sorry, donations and recurring donations. So, like Vineet was saying, it could be an opportunity, which is part of the sales platform. And then one of my question is that always comes to my mind is: are these donations records are mastered in Salesforce? If it is not, maybe your ERP might be the one system mastering these donation records. If so, do we need to keep and copy data to Salesforce or to your CRM system? If not, maybe it could be simple as an external object rather than leveraging the opportunity. But if your use case is to keep the donations mastered in Salesforce, like Vineet said, it could be an opportunity. Maybe if you have multiple flavors of donations, maybe we can record type it. We can have different sales process around those donation objects. Or, like I said, it could be as well as a custom object as well. It all depends on what's your needs. One of the factors I would think to go between custom object and opportunity route is again back to my community example. If the donation needs to be tracked and created from your donor portal, I would not suggest to go with an opportunity, because you cannot leverage customer community if the opportunity is being used for your donations. Then you need to uplift your licensing into a partner community, which I believe, Satya, it's an overkill. Looking at your cost conscious, I believe partner community might be a killer. Hence, looking at these options, I might prefer going into a custom object unless you have other requirements that you have.
I like the way you both are approaching this. You have considered pros and cons across each of these. As you said, we definitely need a portal. We need a way for our donors to access donation and make donations from the portal. So definitely opportunity doesn't seem like the right approach here. So I think we can go with custom object. Also, can you talk about implications of using opportunities and custom objects from an internal user perspective as well? Are there any licensing implications there?
Sure. So we only looked at the experience side of things. But when it comes to the internal users, yes, opportunity requires, like I said, Sales Cloud. If you are not in your day-to-day business, if you are not leveraging any of the other Sales Cloud features, such as your quoting, your contracting, etc., etc., it could be pretty well with going with a custom object where you can leverage the platform license. Again, being cost conscious, it could be very well being a platform licenses as well. I would have another opinion here, so we can brainstorm together, Satya, Gourav, which is again leveraging both. It's sort of a hybrid approach where we pretty much still use opportunity, assuming that for your internal users, you still need Sales Cloud because you might be doing certain other sales related initiatives. But if the requirement is purely to cut down the cost for your experience side rather than moving to opportunity, there's a concept of shadow objects. So it's a combination of a hybrid solution, which we use opportunities for your internal sales lifecycle management, and we create a sort of a custom object we call a shadow object, which is a concept of creating a custom object where the records will have a one-on-one association with the master, in this case opportunity. But then there are certain aspects, considerations with that approach as well. One of the concern is it adds quite a lot of complexity. Now you need to maintain both opportunity as well as a custom shadow object, which only being used for the experience side exposure. And like I said, it's an additional custom object. You might be duplicating your data sets. So there might be storage and volume considerations and so on and so forth. So hence, coming back to your question, I would still keep it simple. I would try to go for a custom object so that you can cut down the cost for your experience side as well as for your internal users by leveraging platform, unless there are other sales related requirements.
Okay. We don't have any other sales related requirements, so I think custom object should be okay for now. I have a follow-up question. You talked about relationships. Are there specific relationships we need to be aware of? And does it have any downstream implications on the automation requirements that we have?
So so when we talk about relationships, like Salesforce provides kind of four flavors of this. So you have the lookup relationships. Uh, we get a one-to-many relationship, like both the objects are not kind of loosely coupled. Then you have a master detail, where you have a parent and a child, where parent governs the ownership of the child record as well as the visibility and sharing of those. And then it also comes with certain inbuilt capabilities like rolling up the values of the child up to onto the parent. And then you have the other hierarchical and plus the self lookups and all those things, which we are kind of don't cover it. Now, one critical thing, as I understand the requirement, like you would also want to understand, how much the donors are contributing. You would want to kind of roll up that value, right? So in those cases, we have master detail relationship that works very best. It comes with a roll up out of the box roll up summary field that you can configure, and then also put additional filters to roll up only a certain subset of those child and all. But the downside that you also need to think is that if you would want to have a separate security between your parent and a child, then in that case, your master detail is not going to work because
Right.
your parent is going to govern everything, right? So if that security comes in mind, you would still go with a lookup, but then you would have to build a small customization around this part where you would roll up the donor amount onto the donor, right?
Got
So
it.
those are some critical aspects or things we would have to ask you, or kind of you need to think that where the trade-off is, where the trade-off sits, and we take a decision from there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. No, I think that's very good perspective from no code to low code slash pro code. From data model perspective, I think yeah, standard versus custom objects and with relationship is a good perspective. Now let's look at the process automation. So yeah, let's do a bit of deep dive there.
Cool. So I'll take this on the process automation. So Satya and Gaurav, as I understand that you need a capability where the donors would be able to self-register themselves, and the application should also uh, kind of automatically calculate and update the total contribution amount of those, which is the roll-up that we were discussing just before this. And you also want some personalized emails to be sent on certain milestones, and there should be an automatic update. So whenever a certain event is completed, you would also want to update some attributes on the volunteer record, right? So so just by reading through it, the very first, again, when I'm going through these requirements, in my subconscious mind, I'm going through the different low code options that are available on the platform. Like when you say self-registered, which you'd mean on the experience side of things, like there is out of the box self-registration module there. Would you activate that and configure the pages there? Uh, when you talk about the roll-ups, again, is the roll-up summary a best fit, or do we need to think of a flow that may roll up those counts if your sharing needs are not met using the master detail? Similarly, for sending out kind of a personalized email, what are the how do you configure the templates? What are the do you need the templates to be configured in multi-language? What kind of personalization do you need? Like, is it a simple dynamic email template that you have, or you are looking for a template that may have a table of or summary of data that you want to send? And is that data possible just by point and click, or do we need to think of any custom way, a custom way to come up with that template, right? And again, what are the out of the box mechanism to send out those emails? Like we can have flow. The email alerts can be configured on top of that to send those flows, to send those email alerts. And then when lastly, when you talk about the automatic update, So again, we have out of the box capability like flows, like a record triggered after save flow and before flow that can be used here to kind of update those record whenever a certain event is scheduled. Of course, you can, if there is a need to do it on a regular basis, you can always schedule it. The schedule flows are always there. You can consider that, schedule it to run every day, every week, every month kind of thing, which does the update. And also the the pause flows where you can uh, based on certain condition when it meets, perhaps you trigger that action and updates it, right? So yeah, so I mean, so going to the solution, these are the things I consider. And while I'm going through uh, concluding that what are the out of the box mechanism, I also think about, like, again, the volume becomes very critical here. What is the volume of transactions? Because when you answer that question, what is the volume of transaction, you automatically get an answer that which governor limits you are definitely going to hit, right? So even if you are using flows, you have 250,000 flows interviews that can be conducted, and that gives an indication. If your volume is too huge, you are anticipating a lot of donations, then maybe flow may not be a correct solution to look for, right? And then uh, again, in terms of notifications, what kind of notifications, which I've kind of briefly touched there, right? So Tuan, what do you think about this?
So before we
Yeah,
move on to Tuan,
Yeah.
I want to know one thing. Are you saying that we can address all these requirements using a no code or low code solution?
Okay, as an architect, I will not say that that's a definite answer, because again, there are multiple ways of doing things on Salesforce. This is what the beauty of the platform is. You get a lot of features from low code to pro code. The decision how you need to make is like you list down all the options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you order them like which is the optimal versus a suboptimal option. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, there is no right and wrong answer. It all boils down to the fact that which is the optimal versus which is the suboptimal, and then you go with the most optimal solution, which of course is scalable and scale to your future needs, and it doesn't hit any limits. You can and it's easy for you to also configure. You may not need the kind of a developer experience to do those kind of things. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Tuan.
cool. Yes, so let me go through the requirements and talk about my perspective again. So if you look at the self-registration itself, some of the questions I think about is, do we need the out-of-the-box Salesforce look and feel, or do you have any branding guidelines? Because at the end of the day, this is customer-facing or donor-facing. So you might have your corporate branding regulations, which may need to follow. So in that case, if the assumption is yes, is it just simple as putting logos and images and fonts, right? Or do we have like requirements around not only just styling, but also like having complex brand and intuitive UI? So in that case, maybe the out of the box registration hand page or maybe a screen flow may not provide you that flexibility. So if that is one of your use cases, maybe we can look at avenues such as customization using lightning web components, right? Then I also think about being again cost conscious. Do we need to do a comparison between buy versus build, right? What is your total cost of ownership? So if it is simple as we just embed some styling into some of the existing components, why not we do that? Or if we need to go down the buy route, we need to look at app exchange products. There might be certain app exchange products which are cost effective rather than building it from the scratch, right? So that's how I think about this. And looking at this, you are into a non-profit organization. The Salesforce has also industry cloud offerings, entirely built for your domain, such as non-profit cloud. Maybe it could be an avenue where we can look at, is that a possibility? I know there's a licensing implication, but these are, like Vineet said, these are some of the options you can put down and see what is best fit for your use case. Similarly, when it comes to the automation side of things, yes, if you have decided master detail for your calculation, yes, it could be simple as a roll-up field. But for some reason, because your data security and privacy is utmost importance, and if you went with a lookup relationship, maybe we cannot use those out of the box features. such as the rollup. Hence, we might have to build some automation. It could be like Vineet said, record trigger flow, or it could be an Apex trigger behind it. Right? So again, what I would think about the approach of those two is how complex is your calculations? Again, coming back to the volumes, the governance limits, do you need custom error handling or exception handling? Or are there any customizations that requires? Maybe Apex Trigger might give you that flexibility. Again, it comes down to how much developers or the resources that you have in-house versus do you want to consider sticking into the no-code paradigm? And thirdly, when it comes to emails, this is a very important element. Right? Salesforce out of the box provides you sending emails without any customization. But I would also ask you about, are these emails sent by the users manually or are these automated processes? Similarly, who are these recipients? Are we sending it to the donors, or are we sending it to the internal, or are we sending some external contacts? So then there might be certain limitations or governance limits in Salesforce. And also, coming back to the branding requirements, do you have again branding requirements for all the email communications? So in that case, we might have to set up letterheads, email templates, and so on and so forth. But lastly, are these emails transactional emails or commercial promotional emails? And depending on that, there might be other tools may be used for these use cases. If it is more commercial, like for example, it could be an app exchange product, or it could be an extended Salesforce ecosystem product. And finally, thinking about the Procode mindset, some of the questions I would ask is, do you need to support multi-language? Today, you might need to not support multi-language, but eventually you might, like you mentioned about M&A, you might go into other regions, other sectors, where you might need in the future to support multi-languages. Then the question is, how many templates you need to maintain? How many languages you need to maintain? Then coming back to your cost impact, what is the total cost of ownership to maintain all these multi-language, multi-template scenarios? Do you need easy maintenance product versus do you want quick and easy time to market solution? Right? If that is the case, maybe Visualforce based multi-language templates might be an option where you might have to build once, but maintenance might be quick and easy. Right? And lastly, around the automation, again, Vineet mentioned about flows. Again, it depends on the volumes, depends on the complexities, depends on the flexibility that you need. It might be very well be an Apex trigger, like I mentioned. It all comes down to what the complex scenarios you want to manage.
Right. And just to add on to that, like a lot of these process automation, again, and the areas perhaps we'll be covering in further down the line is also tied up to the data model that we select, right? So there we briefly touched like what kind of relationship, right? So if you would have selected a kind of a master detail relationship, yeah, maybe there may be a trade-off on sharing versus the roll-up summary might work here. But if you had gone with a lookup, yes, you may be looking at customization on top of it, and also like how did you design your data model? What are what level of normalization you went in? Because the moment you go with you create a lot of child objects to maintain those kind of data, then if you are building a custom logic to roll up the counts, you need to think about your SQL queries, like how many nested queries you may have to do, how many for loops you will have to iterate, and again, what is the time the whole logic is taking to, so that your performance is not taking a hit. So each of those areas, like data model, process automation, in my opinion, like those are not isolated. Everything is kind of tied back. So as an architect, it's your responsibility. You take a step back, have a think about the big picture before you kind of conclude on an optimal solution there.
And in the Procode option, do I need to be sensitive about some security implications as well?
Yes, Satya, there might be implications if you go down the Apex route. So when it comes to security model, under security here, looking at the code perspective predominantly, there could be certain vulnerabilities around Apex, Lightning Web Components and Sokal, just to name a few, right? So if you start with data security in Apex generally runs in system context. So which means the current user's permissions and the field level security are usually ignored. So therefore, when writing Apex code, there are certain best practices is given by Salesforce where you need to make sure you consider both object and the field level security as well as enforcing record level security, right? So if I just touch upon the field level security, there are certain Apex functions given by Salesforce just to check your field and object level permissions. Like for example, whether the object is accessible, is creatable, is updatable, and so on and so forth. Similarly, when it comes to record sharing, like I said, it's runs on system mode. So when you declare an Apex class, you typically start with a keyword. I will here only touch upon two main ones. One is called the with sharing, the other one is called the without sharing. So with sharing basically runs the Apex code in the context of a current user, and it gives that perspective of that current user's record level access. Versus without sharing, it runs in the system mode where you have basically bypassing the entire Salesforce record role-based access model, and you give that super user privilege. Similarly, when it comes to a UI element where if you customize with Lightning Web Components, again, there are certain considerations. And if you stick to Salesforce's best practice where you use the base components using the Y adapters, Salesforce enforces by default the CRUD, FLS, and sharing by default. But then again, you might do extreme end where you might have to invoke an Apex class. Then again, like I said in the previously, practice those best practices to avoid any vulnerabilities on the Lightning Web Components. And finally, on the SOCL side, if you run a SQL statement and execute a query, you need to use the security enforce keyword with security enforce. So it adheres to certain check. It will do by default the permissions check before it executes and queries the data. And similarly, if you want to prevent any SOCL injections, you can use type safe binding to avoid any malicious input by any third party, right? And similarly, for some reason, if you happen to use dynamic queries, try to escape, try to do typecasting, just to make sure no SOCL injections can happen. Yes, there are certain elements to simply answer your question. If you go down the Procode route, there are certain security aspects you need to be conscious of. Yes.
Right. So what you're saying, if I have to summarize this, is yep, you with Procode you get the flexibility, but the amount of code you would write will be more. You have to be more conscious to enforce the security controls in your code. You may have to write unit tests to ensure that what you have written is unit tested as well. So your overall maintenance over a long period of time is going to be much larger in the Procode scenario, and you are effectively trading that off with for flexibility and the look and feel and the branding of that is right. Again, yes. as you said, it is always a choice on which route to go, but the choice is not always very obvious, right?
Yes, like Vineet suggested, we have to provide you the options and discuss along with you to understand what is the complexity, what is the trade-off that you require. And depending on that, we will give our thought leadership around if we have to go with Procode, these are the things we need to be conscious of.
Got it. And I think there are some integration related requirements as well. Do you want to touch upon that?
Yep. So I think understanding your integration. So in my opinion, like I think integration is a very kind of interesting area, and it is very integral and very important part for any modernization project, or let's say any kind of digital transformation that you're looking for. So integration is very critical, and as we understand, it's critical for you as well. Maybe it can be as a make or break situation for the whole organization that you're looking for, right? We understand that you are looking to see, so you are looking to integrate with certain third-party systems for fraud checks. You have a backend ERP system where you would want to capture the donor details and perhaps update things back inside of Salesforce. And also there is the requirement where you would need the payments to be made online from the Experience Cloud portal that you have requested us. So now, when it comes to integration, so before going on the integration options, so I take I take a different route. So the first set of questions that perhaps I'd like to interview or is like around the NFRs, right? So that's where your integration typically should start. So when I say about NFRs, like uh, so when you talk when I say talk about NFRs and your corresponding systems, like for example, third-party system, like have you chosen a system? Is the system already there in your landscape, or you are also looking for us to do kind of some kind of vendor analysis or also come up with a third-party system?
So
Like these
NFR is non-functional requirement.
non-functional
Yeah,
requirements. Sorry, I didn't
yeah.
express this loudly, but yeah, so non-functional requirements. So again, what are the different systems you have? How performant those systems are? Do we anticipate the response to come immediately, or do we anticipate the response to come in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or maybe a day, or whatever that time takes in? What are the governance limits that's governing the other platform? Like there may be a cost associated to that platform, that the number of API calls that you make in there, it's bearing a cost, right? So you need to be conscious of how many call outs also you are making. And then in terms of the volume that it can process, only a certain volume, it can only deal maybe a REST API or a SOAP API kind of thing. So all of those, and of course also the security mechanism, what the security mechanism is supposed. So these NFRs, I think it's the first level of detail that we would like to understand. And once that understanding is there, the other following the following options or the suggestion of the optimal versus suboptimal option drives most of them. Now, based on your response on certain system, let's say if you have not chosen a third-party system, we may look for an option where an app exchange product is available, that may be provided by one of the fraud check vendors, right? So that is compatible and that is native to Salesforce. Perhaps we may go with that so that it can be just installed on top of the Salesforce platform, and it can be injected or kind of integrated with the flows or the automations that we are building. So again, being very pro code, a lot of these app exchange product comes with a point and click capabilities where you just configure and then it can make those call outs for you instead of building those, right? Then similarly for the backend ERP system, now if you say it's a SAP-based kind of product which supports maybe a SOAP API only, right? So in those cases, we would have to think of where that protocol transformation happens, right? And then what are the different mechanisms on those, how those integrations can be executed. Now, the low-code options may be like use of flows plus the external services, writing a flow to publish a kind of a platform events, and then if this is a kind of a data replication need, then can a CDC event also help in here, right? And lastly, when it comes to the payments, again, if there is a vendor that is already being used in the enterprise, perhaps we may have to think around that. But if not, then the consideration would be, can an app exchange product be used here, right? One critical thing here would be to be also be PCI compliant. So again, Salesforce does have the PCI certification, but at the end, if you're implementing a payment solution as an architect, this is your responsibility to also implement the PCI compliance needs. You need to be aware of what those PCI compliance are, how would you securely store the credit card information, bank account kind of relationship. First of all, are you even storing that? Is there a need to store that? And if there is a need, then we need to think of all of these questions. And then that's where instead of building a custom product, can an app exchange product comes in, which is already PCI compliant, which is handling all of those needs. Can that be just bought over and then easily be installed, integrated with your process, and can also help you go to market faster, right? Before I go into other areas, perhaps I'll let Tuan add his views on the Procode side of things as well.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would think about some of the NFRs like Vineet was talking about. One of the NFRs I will look at is this integration going to be near real time versus scheduled, right? So assuming that this fraud check has to be a real time, so that before you onboard a donor, you need to check the fraud details and then you proceed with the options, the next steps. I would pretty much think this as a synchronous request reply type integration pattern. And then the question is, you are mentioned in the requirement clearly, there are third-party systems. So it's plural. So meaning there might be more than one systems in your ecosystem. So a couple of other questions come to my mind is, do we really need to do a point-to-point integration between Salesforce and the third party? Or does it need to be sort of loosely coupled? Right? If it is loosely coupled, in the meaning that it's not tightly integrated to each other, where you have the flexibility to bring in more third parties or maybe decommissioning one, do we need some sort of a middle layer or middleware rather, right? So do we need similarly some service orchestrations, right? So whereas if for some reason one fraud system is unavailable, do we need to automatically orchestrate to another system to do a fraud check rather than saying the customer, sorry, try again later, right? So these are some of the NFRs we will have to brainstorm together to
Is the
understand
middleware
what is.
going to cost me more?
Uh, yes, Satya, there are certain products where, of course, the commercials that you need to deal with those vendors, but simply yes. The answer is
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, like you said, we need to be cost conscious, but then again, we need to understand what is your roadmap. If your enterprise already has a middleware which we could piggyback to, then it could be a valid reason for reusing that. Or if we need to introduce something new, such as for example in our Salesforce ecosystem, there's a middleware called MuleSoft. Yes, we could introduce that, but then again, the main impact point is we need to understand what is your roadmap, what is your strategy going forward, and what are the NFRs, like Vineet was mentioning, right?
But
So
MuleSoft is
from
very expensive. I don't think, Gaurav, I don't think we can afford MuleSoft, right?
No, MuleSoft is going to be very expensive. What are the other alternatives?
there are many in the vendor ecosystem, Gaurav. Purely looking at the technical perspective, I think the key requirement here is first and foremost, do we have a middleware that we could piggyback to? Assuming it's yes, maybe we could look at avenues where Salesforce can do integration, the loosely coupled integration with that middleware. Assuming you don't have something, there are certain spectrum of vendors do the same thing. So we need to look at technical capabilities of those middlewares and see, secondly, what is the licensing impact to your organization to recommend you what's the best fit middleware. But the key question is, looking at your requirements, Satya, looking at your future vision, do we envision that there are multiple third-party systems? Do you envision that there are certain systems you want to eventually decommission, maybe introduce more systems? Like I said, or what's the user experience that you need to provide to the end user if for some reason a system is unavailable, and so on and so forth. That is the trade-off, I think, that we are discussing here when it comes to this integration, right? Similarly, on the other requirements where some of the details needs to be sent to the backend system, again, the first question comes to my mind is does it needs to be real time? Can that be a near real time integration, right? So based on the requirement that we have in front, I'm assuming this is a more of a asynchronous near real time integration. Whereas we can send an information into the backend system where the donor doesn't need to wait the response come back to that, right? So in that case, there are again certain options when it comes to low code and pro code. It could be simple as a platform event. Then the biggest question is, can the ERP system, right, consume an event-based model? Versus, do we need to piggyback to one of the middleware so that the middleware does the protocol conversion and subscribe into those events, right? Those are some of the technical questions comes to our head. And finally, when it comes to the payment management, I will some of the questions comes to my mind again is, do we need to capture and manage these payments and master in Salesforce? Or these payments are managed in your legacy ERP system, right? Or do we have an enterprise payment gateway that you leverage for some other reasons? Can that be piggyback to Salesforce, right? And most importantly, when it comes to compliancy, we need to adhere to the PCI compliance, like Vineet was talking about, right? So we need to be clear that what are we storing, what are we transacting, where the data is mastered. And finally, when it comes to payment gateway, there are two avenues that I look for. One is it a hosted checkout versus a direct payment? So direct payment is simply that you do a integration where we capture from CRM, we capture the details. Again, whether we store or not, that is a separate discussion. But the details that are captured is directly sent to a payment processing system. Whereas in the hosted checkout, we use the merchandise UI. So it's more of an embedded UI in the platform where we at Salesforce or the CRM, we doesn't capture or store any of the details, where we allow the hosted system, the merchant, to do all the complexity behind the scene where we are fully PCI compliant. So these are the options that we have, and based on what's your appetite, you can decide whether we need to do exchange product that we can introduce to manage all the complexity versus if ERP is managing, can ERP provide us a hosted checkout option? Otherwise, the last option is integration, where we need to make sure we fully support the PCI compliance.
Yep. And yeah, just to add on to this, like the other aspect of the NFRs is also the authentication side of things, right? So of course, I'm not going to deep dive into the authentication, but like as a product, like on a low code, if you are going for an external services, you need to be aware that what all authentication mechanism it supports. So it is compatible with the name credential and the external credentials capability that you have on the platform. And then when you talk about name credentials, currently whatever flows, what all overflows does it support, right? So you should be aware of, because eventually you are going to integrate with a backend system. Now, if that doesn't support that authentication mechanism, it doesn't support that API schema, which the external services support the open API schemas. So if those are not provided, then maybe going with the external services might not be a good option, or maybe that's not even an alternative. Then you may have to think of the going with the custom route and all. And then just to come back to the question that you asked about the middleware, right? So now, again, middleware may not be an appetite for everyone. Maybe it is good for you, but we need to think of the bigger picture and what the future roadmap you're looking for. Now, if there may be a need that, let's say, some of the systems can be changed, or you need to integrate with certain systems, or you want to introduce a kind of a mobile app in the future, then those kind of orchestrations is where it becomes very complicated. Right now, it may look like a point to point, maybe an easy one, but then down the line, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, your ecosystem or the whole architecture landscape will become very complex, right? So that's where something tools like middleware come into play, where you decouple those kind of integrations. And also, if you have a legacy system, that's where which doesn't support the latest and the greatest of the authentications and the integration patterns, that's where middleware can come in and kind of support in those kind of activities. Now, one more aspect, the last aspect I think is around the retry and error handling, like as and when we are integrating, how do you do the error handling? Like if error happens, who is going to again retry those? Is there an automated retry you're expecting, or is it more of like you're okay with the business users clicking a button again to do those kind of retries and those manual activities? And then if these kind of error happens, then how do you log that? Do you want that logging capability in order to debug, let's say if some system failed down the line, maybe it was down for some reason, then those kind of log enables you to track that, yeah, there was an error, then you can proactively go and look into those kind of things.
No, this is
Yeah.
good. This is good discussion. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that's very good perspective of integration on how pro code and low code can actually give different scenarios to be solved. Now, let's quickly go into the next bit, last bit, which is capturing a lot of different aspects.
Right. So lastly, I think these requirements that we understood is you need a capability or a feature to kind of generate a donation certificates for our donors, which they would want to use it for their tax exemption purposes. You also want some kind of reporting needs around the donor demographic. Like the foremost and the most important thing, you want this whole platform to be more to very tight in terms of security, so that unauthorized people, or let's say people who are not allowed to see certain data, you can control that. Your customers' data privacy needs and the access controls are considered in that, right? So I'll start with the kind of the security model side of things. So again, Salesforce as a platform is very rich in the different sharing mechanisms it's kind of provide. There are certain best practices that you kind of need to adhere to, right? Like starting with the OWT, you start with the least privilege policy, and then you start opening up access only to people who would you want to. Now, the interesting feature about Salesforce is that Salesforce, if I'm not wrong, at the moment, Salesforce provide 25 plus ways to kind of share, right? That's a lot on a platform, right? And as it rightly said, like with great power comes great responsibility, and that's where we as an architect need to think that uh, we don't write a lot of sharing mechanisms that ends up being redundant. A lot of sharing records getting inserted because at the end, when your volume grows used, the performance takes a hit because of these kind of sharing calculations and all. So it's very, again, going down to the data model side of things is very critical to understand that what are objects that you have chosen, like for example, person account or account or contact, and on if an opportunity you have selected, then what are the different inbuilt sharing capabilities that are there? So if for example, a contact, it can be controlled by parent, then you have certain child implicit sharing that is available with the account, where you can also govern the opportunities access and the contact opportunity and the cases access from on top of it, right? And then so these are certain kind of inbuilt capabilities. Then of course, if you have selected a master detail relationship, then it also comes with an inbuilt sharing mechanism. You have role hierarchies, right? The way you set up the people who own a specific record, right? Role hierarchy comes into play, where it automatically gives grant access to the people higher up in the hierarchy. And then of course you have then the custom way of sharing things, your criteria based, ownership bearing, territory management, and all those things comes into play, right? So again, considering data model and what inbuilt capabilities those standard objects offer in terms of security is very critical to understand before you deep dive into kind of utilizing the other powerful capabilities of opening the sharing. And when it comes to reports and dashboards, again, Salesforce as a platform is pretty good in terms of the reporting mechanism that is provided, right? But again, you can only report to the data that is there on the platform. Now, if you want to kind of get a kind of a holistic picture where data might be sitting in Salesforce, but also on the ARP, maybe that ARP is not integrated by external objects and all, then what are the ways? How do you report on those kind of things? Do you have something in your enterprise like a Power BI or a Tableau uh, application that can be used to give that holistic view to the higher managements? Or is it like if the data is just resident into Salesforce, is the standard reports or the custom reports enough for you? Do you need to come up with the custom report types? And even again, when you think about the custom report type, it again joins to the data model side of things, how you have created those relationships. If there is no relationship between those objects, even though there is a reporting need, right, you would not be able to deliver it because the data model has not been set up. And again, if you go retrospectively, go back and fix that, creating a relationship, then again, you need to think of what is the repercussions on the process automations that you have already set up. Then what about the integrations that you have set up? Then what are the different volumes and the NFRs? So it's a kind of a domino effect. One I'd not say bad decision. I'd not say wrong decision. Like one bad decisions. Like again, it's not that it's not fixable, but again, it'll take that time. You have to think a lot of areas. You may have to revisit a lot of areas before you can kind of patch that problem that you identify. Yeah. Tuan, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the security. I think I have covered a lot when it comes to the Apex side of things. So, but I'll give a quick reminder to all the listeners. Please watch the Gaurav's and Satya's previous episode of sharing and visibility, where these legends have talked about the sharing and visibility of the platform in detail. And also, both Vineet and I had a speaker session with Odysseus Data Innovation last year, where we talked about Architect's Guide to Data Security and Privacy. So have a look on those elements so that you can get a perspective of the security of Salesforce. But I'll talk about the other two requirements briefly, Gaurav, Satya, with regards to the generating of the document. So I consider some of the questions in my mindset about this requirement, right? So is this a requirement where you need to generate a document as a one-off requirement? So you are talking about the generating donation certificate for tax exemption, right? If it is a one-off requirement, or do you have foreseen any other reporting requirement or document requirements, right? Well, does you require a templated version of generating documents, versus do you want the templates to be fixed, sort of a thing? So what I mean by that is, does the business folks requires to maintain the templates, versus can that be an ad hoc request to your BAU or development team to manage those templates, right? Again, coming back to your cost, what is the total cost of ownership? What do we build this one-off requirement for you, or should we buy a vendor solution so that you have the flexibility even for your upcoming requirement, right? So in my opinion, if it is a one-off requirement, it could be simple customization in the platform, where you can build a blockchain capability using customization routes such as Visual Force to Apex, for an example, where you can build this solution as part of your OPEX, your operational cost, versus if you want to have a strategic view where you want to have more requirements, where you need to purchase and exchange products, it could be one of your capital expenditure where you need to upfront buy all the licenses for the vendor product and so on and so forth, right? So in my opinion, cost is also an impact for choosing this right solution. And next, about the reporting requirements, like Vineet correctly mentioned, it all depends on the data model and where the data is stored. That will dictate the solution, whether the platform reports and dashboard capability, or do we need to go for a business intelligence product, right? But I would also consider in a Procode mindset, especially when it comes to the community, for the donor. Is the donor requires sort of a reporting capability where all my donations and my recurring donations can be viewed, right? Or maybe some aggregations, right? So if that is the case, as we know, with customer community, standard reports and dashboard capability is not allowed. So unless you purchase a partner community as an uplift, standard reports are not allowed. So hence, if that is a use case, I don't know whether we haven't discussed that in detail, but if there's a use case for a customer community, for the donors to have sort of a reporting capability, this is where customization route can be an option, where we can build a custom Lightning Web component, give you that flexibility rather than changing your licensing model, paying high cost licenses. Instead, if it is a one-off requirement, maybe we can build a customization with Lightning Web components to give that analytical view to the donors.
Right. Not, I think that's a great perspective on all security and reporting and different Apex products. I think that was very helpful to understand. Let's go through the final bits. Maybe Satya, let's wrap up with the final thoughts.
Yeah, I can wrap about Tuan. Maybe you want to take a stab?
Yeah. As a final thought, yes, like we discussed in detail, data model is the foundation. So if your data model is correct, if you have taken the right decisions, again, like Vineet said, there's no wrong decision. There could be a bad decision where we can still change and modify based on the requirements. It depends on the data model, underneath data model as upfront, right? And security is utmost importance, like Satya mentioned. So Salesforce allows you a comprehensive security model. So we need to stick to the data model and the security and some of the integrations that we discussed. And always look for the bigger picture, right? Have a holistic mindset. Have that 50,000 foot view as an architect. Don't look at a siloed solution where it will have an impact to the other areas. So have a holistic view. So that will give you an perspective of not just the current sprint, not just the current road, the immediate future, but it will give you that perspective where what happens in the business in the full holistic roadmap. And always have multiple ways to solve a same problem. Have your different opinions, put your thought leadership, put your point of view, and come up with what you think are 2 or 3 best ideas to solve the same problem, and brainstorm with your other fellow members, right? Like Vineet and I did. Talk about what's your thinking process is, and talk to the customer. And customer may have given you certain requirements like we had today, where they have not even brought us all the vision that they have. It might be a immediate requirement. It might be an MVP that they are looking for. But having that discussion with the CTO, the technical folks, and the business folks, we can understand further what are the elements we need to consider. By putting up these multiple views.
Just to continue what Tuan is saying is there are multiple ways to solve a requirement. Always take a holistic picture of work through your customer, talk to your customer, educate them on the pros and cons, right? You have to go with the assumption that the customer does not understand Salesforce. They may not understand all the implications end to end. So it's your job as a Salesforce architect to make sure that they understand that if they make this choice, it's because of these reasons. Document them to a certain extent and take a call. Again, it's a toolbox. Platform is very, very flexible. You can do a bunch of things. Doesn't mean that you should necessarily do it. Always ask the question on why you're doing it, your why. Coming back to the why question is, as long as you're able to say, yes, this is the reason I took this decision, it's fine, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, sometimes we make an intentional decision knowing that it's going to be tech dead in the future. But that's the best solution in the moment, and it's fine to make those decisions, right? So yeah, this was a fantastic episode. I really loved it. I really appreciate the point of view you both brought to the table here. And the depth of the knowledge that you both have on the platform is superb. So really appreciate you coming on the pod. And we hope to actually see you again in the future because we have a few more topics to go. So yeah, over to you,
Awesome.
Gaurav.
No, thank you both, Vineet and Tuan, for taking our time. It was quite a journey to land on a particular time and the content and the journey. Really appreciate of you to take out time for on this particular episode.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And thank you, Satya and Gaurav, for having us here, for having me here, at least I will say. And it was really good to come here, share our thoughts, like what are the things on day-to-day basis. So we go through what are the thoughts we apply when we are designing it, and then of course it also help us revisit our CTA times, right? So these are the exercises I used to go through, brainstorming this, that, and all. Yeah. And at the end, for the audience, it's like with great power comes great responsibility. Salesforce is a very big platform. It has lots of features. Now again, choose the optimal solution. If you can justify, live through that day, that's the best solution for you.
Yeah.
Same here, Gaurav, Satya. Thanks again for having us. And like Vineet was saying, going through this scenario, it was like a deja vu feeling, going back to the study times. And both Gaurav, Satya, I was not part of your study group, of course, but we had chats in the past when I was going through my journey. So it was like a deja vu feeling where I was like going back to my study notes. It was a good exercise. It was fun.
The good old Melbourne days, yeah.
Yes.
Alrighty, folks.
Awesome.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Yes, guys.
Bye.
So with this amazing conversation, we conclude this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. We look forward to bringing more exciting and relevant content in the upcoming episodes.